everyone, and welcome to another SheClicks webinar. Tonight we're hearing about content creation on a Cumbrian farm. Now this webinar is sponsored by Sony. Sony Corporation is a creative entertainment company with a solid foundation of technology. From game network services to music, pictures, electronics, semiconductors and financial services, Sony's purpose is to fill the world with emotion through the power of creativity and technology. For more information, visit sony.net. Tonight's webinar is presented by Amy Bateman, who won the title of British Life Photographer of the Year 2019, and she is joining us from her farm in Cumbria. Hi Amy, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks Angela.
Great, lovely to see you.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. Nice to see you too.
Very fine top that you're wearing there, I like that a lot.
I had to have the uniform on. I think everybody ought to have them for these sessions.
Fantastic, yes, that's a great idea, and drink from their SheClicks mugs.
Damn, got one of those.
Anyway, I understand you have prepared a fantastic presentation for us, so if you'd like to make a start, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much everybody for coming and listening this evening. We've just had a bit of a chat to Angela, and we are going to be popping it on the YouTube channel as well, so if you want to watch again or listen again. But I'm going to talk to you tonight about how I create some of my content here on our farm in Cumbria. Now, I haven't been doing photography very long at all. I'll give you a little introduction into me. About 7 years ago, I took this photograph on a little DSLR, really entry level, and I absolutely loved it. And I had these great visions of being a wonderful photographer. And at the time I was a physiotherapist. And if you'd have said in 7 years' time I'd be sitting here talking to you as a photographer, I wouldn't believe you. But anyway, obviously I live on a farm on the uplands, just on the fringe of the Lake District. This is my husband and some rough-tail sheep. And the whole picture told a story for me about what was happening that day. And my pictures generally tend to tell a story, and I love to have an image that you can get yourself involved in and have a good look around and work out the narrative that's coming through the picture. And so about 4 years ago, I traded in my DSLR for a better model and went and booked in on a course at the local art centre. My husband paid me to go to the evening classes. I was looking after my 3 children who were babies at the time, and I got addicted to photography. And so I had no idea what sort of niche I was going to be interested in. I was just playing around, learning all the different ways. And I picked up a macro lens and did a little project on frog spawn. And so I had a jam jar, which they soon outgrew. And I pointed a little torch through it, and at night I took a picture each day throughout something like a month and a half, and put them together and developed a chronological collection of the morphological changes in frog spawn. So this was just literally from a fish tank and a torch at home. So it was on the farm, but we rescued the frog spawn out of a pothole. And I have to say, I don't Photoshop my images. They are organic, totally organic. I might take the odd something out if it's distracting, but that's a frog spawn swimming upside down. I actually flipped that 180 degrees because the surface of the water is at the bottom, but that is actually what is underneath a tadpole. And that's a tadpole having a poo. Amuses its children nonetheless. So I started then really exploring different angles in photography, and went out with my husband, and I always carry my camera with me. And we'd been up on the fell. It was a murky grey Cumbrian day, as you can see, and I learning very fast to embrace the gloom. My husband hates this photo. I promised him I wouldn't show it. So because the sheep are all filthy, but anyway, and this ended up in a French biennial of photography. They seem to like it as well, and it's entitled The Wrong Side. So on our farm, we've got lots of sheep. We have about 2,000 sheep. about to hunt cattle, and I just take my camera with me. Now, I am working now as a photographer, so I don't really work on the farm very much anymore at all. We've got a chap that's working for us now. But my camera still goes everywhere, and there are opportunities still around the farm, and I do go and catch up on the days when they're doing interesting stuff to go and get some photographs. But I tend to go now when there's better light. So this was just a local hill, and I popped up with a friend, and I called this the Helm Ponies, and the local hill is called the Helm. Popped with a friend, walking dogs, and this wild ponies, well, not wild, but they are sort of not feral, but they're not really ridden or looked after. The fell ponies, that's what they are. They just walked right on the other side of this tarn, and I had my camera, and I click, 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 and I looked back at my camera, and I completely blown the shot. It looked rubbish straight out of camera, but thankfully I hadn't blown the highlights too much, and pulled it back and created this image. And in 2018, I entered this online on one of the weekly Twitter competitions with photo speed, and I won the week with that. And then it was selected at the end of the year to win photo speed photographer of the year. And I am ridiculously competitive, and I got a taste for it. And I thought, you know what, if one picture can win, let's take some more, let's win some more. And so I kept going. So I entered Photo Crowd, won a couple on Photo Crowd, got some nice prizes. I can't even remember which one this won, but this was one of my very early creations of Meg the dog. And somebody was really impressed that I was more interested in photographing the dog rather than the beautiful sunset that was going on behind her. And then this is Meg, again, in the doorway at home in the yard here, and this is in one of the shippons, and I've been mucking it out. And she just lay down. Now, I did slightly alter this image. I don't tend to move things too much, but I did position the broom in a slightly better place, and I hung my coat on the door. My camera bag had been hanging there, so I moved that out of the way. And I kept on having to try to bite back and go, Meg, no, lie down, Meg, lie down, lie down. And then, so that's about as far as I go to create my images. Most of them are just literally organic as they come. And I entered this into the British Life Photographer of the Year Awards, and that also got highly commended. And then I've taken lots of photos of sheep. This one was actually purchased within the first year. When I turned auto off my camera, I got this shot, and I entered it into little competitions, and it's fun, various little things. And British Wool actually approached me and asked to purchase it, so it went on exclusive license for 2 years. I was a bit shocked at how much they offered, and somebody said I should negotiate for twice as much. But my naivety got the better of me. I know better now. So this is just came out of license not long ago, so it can start circulating again. But that's done very well for me, that image. And it just came about literally from having my camera with me all the time. We were out feeding sheep, and they were waiting at the gateway, and putting their food in the feeders for them, and they're waiting, and they were just there. And so snap. And then this picture, probably most of you will have seen or be aware of maybe. This is the one that I won the British Life Photographer of the Year for. And this picture means an awful lot to me, not just because it won the competition, but I don't normally set my pictures up other than Meg in the gateway. But I'd been in here with my husband. We've been feeding our pet lambs. And these lambs don't have a mum for whatever reason, so I'm their mum, and I have to give them bottles of milk every 3 or 4 times a day. We've now got a much more mechanised system with a machine that produces milk, so I don't have to do this anymore. But in this stable, I feel really calm and peaceful. There's the noise of the lambs pottering around by my feet, rustling in the straw. There's the warmth from the heat lamp, which is what the lamp is. And it gives this beautiful orange glow, and it's quite warm in there. And the smell of the milk powder, and lambs have a particular smell. And it's a time of year that really makes you survive the rest of the year in farming. Slamming time, it's very rewarding. It's incredibly difficult, and it's very, very intense. We work very hard for an extended period of time, but it's just a wonderful time of the year. And I wanted to capture that. I wanted to capture how I felt. This is my stable. My husband has nothing to do with it, and I look after the pet lambs in here. So I took my tripod in one day, and I've got the remote control in my other hand, and click, 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 look back at the camera, and I just knew straight away I'd got the balance. Checking the histogram, always checking my histogram so I can see what's happening in the shadows and what's happening in the highlights and the lamp and everything. And it just got balanced really easily. It was almost like it was meant to be. And then these three lambs just came and stood right in front of me and just added to that composition. And I've got that printed really big at home. And of course, I entered that into the competition and I won the rural category of the British Life Photography of the Year Awards. And they also chose it to be the overall winner. And I'm absolutely thrilled. And it's really, really worth entering competitions because this has definitely launched me. The publicity I've had from winning that competition has helped my commercial work. I'm now a commercial photographer. I've got lots more followers through the internet, sold lots more prints, and I'm able to now work full time as a photographer. I was already working as a photographer when I entered this, but I can now work full time. It's really made a massive difference. So it's definitely worth getting in there and entering those competitions, ladies. Somebody did say it was really, really nice that a female photographer won a major competition. So there we go. And so around our farm, we've got lots of landscapes, and I call myself an accidental landscape photographer. I don't do sunrises. I don't do sunsets. 3 children is kind of a bit of a bind to being able to get out, and my husband's a farmer, so he's out all the time, so he can't stay in and look after the children, the animals in feeding. So if I happen to take a landscape photograph, it's not planned, it's purely by accident, and so I quite enjoy it when I come back with the content that I actually really like. So this is called the Road Home. Our farm, we've got 900 acres here. So we're looking towards Kentmere there. The big hills in the background, the Kentmere Round, if anybody knows, that's on the edge of the Lake District, just past Staveley on the way to Windermere. And I was just dashing off to photograph the sunset actually over the Howgills. And this was on the way, and I actually stood on the roof of the car to take it. I hope my husband doesn't watch it, he doesn't know that's how I took it. And this was where I was going to photograph. This is an arch near home, and I love, it's the actual entrance to it's a private entrance to somebody's farm. Luckily we know them, and I love the view through here. And I am getting a seasonal group of photographs through here. So I've got it in the snow, and I've got it here in the middle of summer. And I want to try and represent the seasons, but it's farming seasons because, of course, it's farmland that you can see through the archway. The grass has been mown into rows, there's sheep around, there's cows in there. And that, to me, sums up harvest time, just at the end of summer there. So I'm trying to go back throughout the seasons and create this series of images that I'm hopefully going to put together and have a lovely, I want to actually frame them and put them up on the wall. But this one sells really well as a print. So, yeah, more sheep, loads of sheep. I mentioned that before, and that's my husband. It's probably the best view of him. When he's farming, he's very focused. But a card company approached me and said, we like your pictures on Instagram. Do you think we can have some for some cards? And they chose 3 of my most successful prints. So I said, no, you can't have those ones. So I had a look around and they found this one. So this is now a card for the country file cards. You might see those out and about in the shops. So that's on exclusive license at the moment. I can show you it now, but I can't print it. We've got lots of different landscapes on the farm, and of course at home I've always got my camera with me. Whatever the weather's like, I can snap away if I'm not working away from home. It's lovely when it snows because it doesn't actually snow as often as you think. I grew up in Yorkshire, and we have a lot more snow in Yorkshire, heck of a lot more snow in Yorkshire, and yet Cumbria doesn't seem to get as much as we did over there. So when it does, I quite enjoy the fact that it's hard to get out. Our lane's quite steep, so we're often stuck at home and I get to mooch around the camera. But ever since I was being a photographer, it doesn't seem to snow as much as it used to. I'm sure that's just me, but anyway. one of the things, other than just having my camera with me all the time to create my images, I have little pockets around the farm. And you may know this if you commute to work or you have a drive to take the kids to school, or you're going to the supermarket or something, and you'll see little compositions, and you'll see little pockets of light sometimes in these compositions. And I actually have a little book, and in my book it'll say snow day, and when it snows I've got a list of little locations that I want to go and see if I can find a composition there. And I've got a day where gloomy days, and I've got another page that will say bright sunshine, moody skies. Well, this was a moody sky day, and I was driving, this is just roadside, I've not gone into our fields at all, and I was just driving along, and the shadow from this tree just fell such a beautiful way just in front, and it's the tree in the shadow which I love the most. And you can let your eye have a little wander through the landscape, looking over towards the Langdales there in the back. I can't remember what lens I used for this, probably my 24 to 70, which I have on a lot if I'm just pottering around the farm. But a lot of my images on the farm literally are roadside, and because we've got single track lanes, I can just stop. It's quiet, I can just stop and just take photos. So it's really worth just having your camera with you all the time, wherever you happen to be going, and just make a note maybe of those little areas you think, oh, I like that tree, and just check it out each time you get it, because the pictures will come, and they do. And I'm finding more and more now, I'm looking into the landscape more, and I think, oh, I like the way those form triangles or threes or the rule of thirds and things like that. And I notice them more and more. And this again was a roadside. It's just literally about 5 meters on from the last picture. That was looking over towards the right side of the road. This one's looking over to the left side of the road. And these sheep have been pottering around by this rock here. This is the two trees next to each other. And I've always been looking here for a composition, but I love sky, and I like drawing details out into the skies too. And what I really like about photography is quite often, and I've learned to see which they are, but you can see content in skies. Your camera can capture content in skies that actually you can't. And when you fiddle around with your clarity and your dehazing Lightroom, it can really draw out a heck of a lot more detail in the sky. So this picture I took because I could tell there was a lot of texture and a lot of activity going on in that sky, but I couldn't see it with the human eye, if that makes sense. So I knew there was something there. So I just reduced the highlights a bit when I got back in Lightroom, and played around the clarity, the dehaze, and you can pull out some really interesting details in skies. So I do like big skies in some of my pictures. I did actually do a little bit of exaggeration on the light that's coming on the sheet, but it seems to work. So you may recognize, if you just look at this, I'll just go back to the last picture. You see how the tree has got a curve? So it's the same tree that's there. And again, this is roadside. I'm standing on the door of the car this time to try and get the angle above, because there's a hedge just below it. And this has got the two big trees there, and I've been looking for ages. Every time I've driven past this, must be a composition, must be a composition. One day it was snowy, I'd gone out to my spot where I wanted to go and have a look and see if there was anything. And this rough-tailed sheep just walked up there and stayed there. And I was barking like a dog to get it to look at me, to stay there. And if you ever see sheep and you want them to look at you, just make the dog noise, because they'll either run or they will look at you and stay still. Anyway, it was just standing there. Let me take the picture, and that tells really well. Chose to convert it to monochrome because it was actually quite a bright day. You can see the sunshine, and I didn't want the blue sky to detract from the snow, so I converted that to monochrome. And again, the snow. So the seasons add great elements on our farm, and farm photography is not seasonally dependent. 365 days of the year, I can find something to photograph. Very privileged. And the sheep in front of you that's got the really snowy bottom, I've got another picture. I should have built this in, but it had its head stuck in the bucket. And I've got another version of this called Head in a Bucket, but this is now called Snow Bum. I just quite like the way they disappear. And if you have a look, I don't know how your resolution is on your monitors, guys, but if you have a look in the very background, there's thin black line, and that's the wall as the snow's coming down quite thick, and everything's just disappearing into the background. And I love the way it's making the sheep disappear because of the thickness of the snow falling. So this is up on, we've got a big bridleway that goes up over our fell. We own a fell called Lamrig Fell. So at lambing time, we come down to these sheep pens. That's my father-in-law. And we do health checks on the lambs and their mums before we take them out of the lambing fields, which are the nice green ones, and we send them up onto the fell. Once they're marked up and they've got ear tags in and they're happy to potter off and everyone's well, they then go and live on the fell and get nice and fat. So we'd finished working with them here, and we must have done about 20 batches of sheep. And every single batch, I'll run up this little hill, hopeful that one day a composition will unfold in front of me. And I've got this picture on so many different days with so many different animals, so many different sheep or cows. But this day, that pocket of light just added to it. And I love the way the leading line of the road leads you down and takes you to that little light in the background. And a lot of farm photography, when I take the landscapes like this, I use the walls, I use the lines of the walls or fences or tracks that the sheep made or tracks on the farm as a leading line. It's really quite useful to taking your eye to where you're wanting the viewers to go and have a look. So we've got cows as well. This is quite a recent one. And what's really nice is in our barns, we've got quite old barns and we've got some new ones, but the calves are born. We try and bring them inside when we know they're calving. Well, they're inside pregnant anyway, but we take them into the back room in the byre when they're calving, and it's got a window, and this calf was born in the morning and the sunlight was pouring in through the window and it was hitting the straw. And so the straw was reflecting this beautiful orange glow underneath the calf, giving this almost rim lighting. So the light on its face is from the window, and it's coming down and it's hitting the straw and giving this golden glow underneath. And because I'm so familiar with our buildings now, I know if there's a cow calving at 9 o'clock in the morning, I've got to go out there with my camera. But if a cow calves at 11 o'clock in the morning, the light's gone and there's no point. And that's just familiarity with your surroundings. It's the same even if you're at home. You'll know yourself when the light comes in through the window, lights up at the corner of your room, your garden. You'll know when it looks right. And it's just a case of catching it when it does. So again, the light here is reflecting off the straw bedding, and it's actually coming in through the doorway, which has slats on it, which is what the lines are on the cow's eyes. But this cow, thankfully our cows are quite friendly. We have beef cows, we're not a dairy farm. So they calve, and the calves live on our farm for about 18 months. We don't finish them, we don't have the right sort of land. We sell them on then to be growing up. But this is one of the mummy cows. And they're quite friendly, I don't have to be too concerned about them. I've got a little bit about Eye Autofocus. I've stolen this from a webinar I did for Sony. So I'm just going to play it for you now.
I've been trying it on the sheep and the dogs. It works on all of our farm animals. So I'll just pull those up now and I'll see if I can get them showing you for you. I'm just going to quickly show you, this camera has already recognised Florence's face there with the white square around it, and I've got our human eye autofocus turned on. So if we have a look here, I have to press the shutter. I use back button focus. So Florence's eye that's closest to us has actually become the point of focus. If you just look towards the door, Florence, for me. That's lovely. And then up towards the back to the camera, and then up towards the calendar, and you see it flicks to the other eye. So it automatically selects back to us, the eye which is closest to us. You can smile. It's allowed. Thank you very much, Florence. So I've got Meg here in the barn this morning. Just going to quickly show you how the animal eye autofocus works on the Sony cameras. This helps me take those perfectly sharp animals eye focus shots with the nice soft background. Lie down, Meg. Meg, lie down. I know you can hear lots going on out there. So we'll quickly change it from subject detection human, pop it onto animal, and then when Meg looks at us, we've got a lovely eye, haven't we, Meg? Should we take a picture? Thank you. Good girl. So I brought my Herdwicks into the pens now, so you can see how the animal eye autofocus works here on the herders as well. So already the camera's picking up the eye on my Herdwick straight away. So with the shallow depth of field, which I love using for a lot of my photos of animals, we are guaranteed to focus on the eye. There we go. Okay, so that gives you a really good idea of the eye autofocus function on my Sony cameras, and I'll just quickly show you what I keep in my kit bag. My favourite camera, the A7R3. It's a 42 megapixel sensor. This is my favourite lens. It's the G Master f2.8. This is the 24-17. It's really versatile. I probably have this on most of the time when I'm pottering out and about. Nice and wide at 24. Gives me a good amount of zoom in at the 70mm end, and of course with a sensor that size I can crop in quite nicely, so if I need a bit of extra reach I'm not worrying too much. So that's my favourite setup. I use that a lot. My backup camera, which actually isn't a backup anymore, it gets used just as much because it's just a superb camera too. This is the A7 III. That's ideal for my property photography. When I'm building up HDR images, when I'm doing the properties that I'm photographing, using 5 images out of this camera to combine them to make an HDR image uses up so much less space on my computer and runs a lot faster to be able to create those images because of the smaller sensor size. So that's really useful. It's great for doing vlogging, videos, movies, that sort of thing as well. I've got a 35mm on here, 2.8. Really quite nice for portraits. I've got some other prime lenses that I regularly use. I love the Zeiss lens 1.8. That's the 85mm. Probably my second favourite lens is the 1.8 55mm. Again, this is a Sony Zeiss lens. That is really nice and lightweight, and combined with the mirrorless camera to chuck on and being able to photograph anything anywhere. That's a superb lens to have in your kit bag. I've got the f4 16-35, which is the Sony Zeiss. I don't need any less than a f4 with this because I tend to use it for landscapes or outdoor portraits, or mostly the property photography. And when I'm doing properties, I can use a slightly longer exposure because I use a tripod a lot. So the f4 works brilliantly for me. And then I've got this big boy, which is probably my third favourite. Yeah, the 70-200, it's the G Master lens. So this is f2.8. Again, really lovely and sharp throughout its range. A very, very, very capable lens. I love it. It's got the collar obviously because it's quite heavy. There's no problem with Sony cameras about the mount. So I do wear it around my neck a lot. And the collar actually makes a very useful little spot to hang your camera when you're on it and you're not using a tripod. So that's in my kit bag.
Sony recently have sent me a lens to try because with animal photography, animals can be quite unpredictable, especially farm animals. You don't want to go in the field with them. So if you want to go and photograph some farm animals, best stay out of the fields, don't risk it, don't chance it, you can't trust them. I don't even trust our own. So I wanted something with a bit more reach. I've got a 70-200, which I love, and popping it on my 42 megapixel A7R3, it's great. But I wanted to go in just a little bit closer. So I borrowed some lenses, and I just thought I'd just show you what I can do with them, because now I've realised I'm going to have to buy one, because I realise it's going to be expensive, this, isn't it? So I'm stood on the track where you saw the sheep and the lambs with the light in the distance. So this is that field. I don't know if anybody noticed it was that feeder. And there's a bull in this field because this was only 3 days ago. We're bulling the cows again. They can actually get pregnant whilst breastfeeding, thankfully. So they've still got the calves on, but they're cycling now, and we're hoping to get them pregnant to be able to calve again next year. And once they're pregnant, we take the calves off them. So the bull's in this field. So I don't trust our bull. He's called Terry. I called him Terry. His name Terry, bull. That's a really bad joke. I'll stick to photography. Right. So I'm stood on the edge of the track here, looking into the field, and these two little cows here. I'll just show you what we did. So I like to play around with compositions. This last picture is just a snap. It's a nice snap of the cows looking at me in the field. So we've got a picture here on the left, and I took this through the gate. So I squatted down and got the gate stoop, as if they're looking as if to go, what's that mad photographer doing? What's she doing? So I'm just experimenting all the time, looking at different angles, how I can take the animals. The cows on the right here, I got down really low and actually took it from underneath the gate. So I've got the grass coming up in front, and just adds a different element to taking animal portraits. So just bear in mind, when you are taking animals, it's really good to get down with their eye level. But there's also different angles as well. I like to experiment with those and see what you come up with. And this is the bull on the left with his ring in the nose. And this zoom lens, I'm stood on the road and I was able to zoom in on one of the calves and get this portrait. So I wasn't very close at all. This is, I think this is a 400mm lens with a 1.4 teleconverter on it. It's just an f8. I had it at 1:640 because I tried it at 1/100, and of course with it being a longer lens, I needed to make the shutter speed a lot faster. I wasn't getting too much shade with it. But 1:640, this just worked, and yeah, it's a character shot. Boy, would my kids love to be able to do that. Be a lot safer in COVID times, wouldn't it? We've got birds on our farm as well, and the chicks give us eggs. No other reason. We don't really sell the eggs. We used to sell them at school, but we're not allowed to take them to school now, so we just supply our family with eggs. And a bit of lovely evening light, and this picture's called Two Birds at the Bar. And in fact, the other day I went in and they'd run out of water, so the kids had not filled up the water in the morning, so I gave them a bucket of water, and I've got a lovely phone shot just from the top with them all stood on the water trough looking in. But the hens are rather photogenic. I got a particular hen, a white and black one. Oh, I might have a photo of it actually. Oh, here we go. This is a Wyandotte. All the others were really, really boring brown hens, and I wanted something a bit different for my photography. It doesn't lay an egg very often, though. I've got told off. Why am I feeding something that doesn't pay? I said, oh, I'll sell some pictures of it instead, and that's made more money than the eggs did. So he can be quiet now. He doesn't mind buying feed when they can make money out of the photographs. And then we've got Herdwicks as well. We didn't have Herdwicks, but after my photography took off, and I'm becoming more renowned now for my sheep photography. In fact, I get some wonderful commissions going across the country now, photographing sheep for various organisations. And I decided I really needed some Herdwicks. They're the most photogenic. People absolutely adore them. And the images sell really, really well. So I suggested to my husband, what do you think about me having some Herdwicks? I won't tell you exactly what he thought. But then I think he thought about it, and he realised that actually it might do quite well. And these now are the most financially viable sheep on the market on our farm. I've only got 4 of them, and they're mine. And we call them Yan, Tan, Tether, and Mether. And they're very happy. So the barn, this is the barn. I have all my pet lambs in here now. This is not the stable where I had the other pet lambs. We've increased our flock size quite a bit recently, trying to Brexit-proof our farm. And lambing time is one time when I really do help a lot. But we had a little poorly lamb. This lamb's called Wonky. And I staged this shot because he can't walk very well, so I knew he'd stand still. So I just popped him. He was loved. I mean, he did die in the end, unfortunately. The kids absolutely adored him. We did as much as we could, but he just was a very simple sort of lamb, and he'd just stand there. And I have included this today because I wanted to show you that even though I take very organic photographs and my pictures basically are what is happening at the time, there are times where the artistic license needs to be played with. So I built this an HDR image. So I did 5 shots, bracketed, 1 stop in between them all, and built them in HDR just to get the balance between the darkness of the barn around the edges and the beautiful light that was happening in the background. And then you can see the big green bucket on the left. that is nearly fluorescent in real life. So I got the brush in Lightroom and toned it down so it doesn't detract your eye. But this image, as nice as it is, it really irritates me. There's so much clutter and so much rubbish, and I want to go and clear it all out. It'd be so much nicer if the land was just looking out there and it's just the barn doors and the countryside. But I live on a real farm. We're not a show farm. We're a very busy working farm. And so I've kind of got used to the fact that all the debris is as it is, even though the artistic person sort of thinks, oh, there's too much clutter. I just have to get used to that. So when I do photography tours, my husband said, am I going to be tidy enough? And we've done a couple already. And I don't tidy up because people actually like to photograph it as it is. It's real. It's, you know, there are some little corners that we've made a little bit nice and a bit tidier, but this is real. So this is Yam. This is one of my herdwicks, and they'd only just arrived on the farm. And they're beautiful. They were shearlings, which means they'd only been sheared once. They hadn't been tucked, they weren't pregnant or anything. They're quite flightier herdwicks, but I got into the ring with them and I've got this series of shots, and I just absolutely adore them. I think this is probably one of my favourite photographs. I love the textures of them. There's something about a herdwick that's got so much texture in the fleeces. In fact, I've done a whole series. I haven't got time to tell you everything. I could talk to you for hours. But I've got a whole series of fleece textures, because all the different breeds have got different textures of fleeces. Some are really short and curly, and some are quite fluffy. They're dark, and somebody asked me today about 50 Shades of Grey, and that's definitely a herdwick. Now, this is cheating a little bit because it's not on my farm, but it's still on a Cumbrian farm. And the sheep on the left is the daddy. And what's really nice about farming in Cumbria is that everybody's quite friendly. So if I ring a farmer up and say, I'm really interested in your animals, or I'd like to come and photograph on your, what do you think? And most people are, yeah, absolutely fantastic. So the guy I bought my herdwicks off lives right in the heart of the Lake District. And he's got fields, which I'm starting to explore, that have got no footpaths on them. And there's views that are there. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very good day. But there are views that are there that I'm really quite excited about, because I know that no other landscape photographers will have been there because it's private land. So I'm going with I'd really like to go and photograph your sheep, but I'm also thinking, oh, there's a landscape that nobody's got yet. But of course, I'll pop a sheep in it anyway to make it worthwhile. But again, I converted this one to monochrome. It was a really grey, gloomy day. And I just loved how the black and white version just draws out the textures, the landscape and the sheep. I got invited to go, stretch my leg. Got invited to go over to Wasdale, which is on the west coast of Cumbria, one of the most beautiful places in the Lake District. It's my place that I absolutely adore. My heart lifts whenever I go there, whatever the weather. And I've got to know some farmers there, and they've invited me to go a couple of times now and watch the gather. So they're bringing 1,000 of these herdwicks up off the fells on the left, bring them down, walking them up the road to the farms where they've been dipped or had the land taken off them, or various things, whatever we do when we're looking after the sheep. And I think this is just going to end up being one of my once in a lifetime images. I absolutely adore this picture. My mum's got it on a massive canvas at home. She loves it too. And we're about to have it printed 4 meters big in the cafe called the Sawmill, which is at the head of Wasdale. And it's going to be there to be on sale as well. And it's a case of being organised. I knew the sheep were going to come round here. I'd chosen my lens. I was able to get ahead of them, and I was organised and prepared enough to get all my settings just bang on, and it was worth it. I just absolutely love this, and it's just going to be one of those pictures that's just going to last a lifetime for me. Another farmer asked me to photograph their hens. They raise pasture-fed chickens, and apart from tasting absolutely delicious, it's a beautiful way to raise chickens because there's no antibiotics. They're all really healthy. They're all relatively free range, and it's a really good way, really organic way of raising chickens. and we went into the barn and he showed us where the little chicks were that they'd just hatched and everything. And there was a tiny little skylight, really small skylight, and it just pointed a shaft of light through. And as he held it out, I said, oh, pop it under the light, pop it under the light. And we managed to get this. So this is just sunlight. And it's just looking for those lights, looking for those moments. And again, stories that, pictures that tell stories. This is a friend's dog. Went to see a friend, and this dog had just had pups. So I said, can I photograph it? It's gorgeous. She's actually a trained sheepdog. And it's a whelping light, causing that orange glow. I have started using lights in my photography, and I do dog photography now with studio lights. And I want to recreate this because I love the way the black Labrador is getting the cold temperature light from the skylight in its hut here. You can see reflected in its eyes. But then the whelping light, when whelping, where the puppies, they have a warm light that they go under, and that was off to the side, and that's given that lovely orange glow. So again, like putting gels on your lights and things, this is totally organic. These are the temperatures of the lights that were actually in there. This is one that I did in the studio of a friend's puppy, spaniel. Going to need a bit more practice, but it's a style of photography I want to get into it and practice a little bit more. And then on the farm, we've got tons of hidden corners. I was saying earlier about how I am so familiar with the light in different parts of the farm and when it comes through. And this is my daughter, Florence. I've got 3 daughters, and at lambing time, they're very involved. We all are. And this was her lamb. And she'd taken it into this little back corridor. And I heard her singing to it, and I potted around. She was just absolutely adorable. But she was moving, the lamb was moving, so I couldn't do a HDR. And I had just decided I had to compromise. The light from the window was so bright, but the corridor was really, really dark. And I compromised to get her the subject of the focus and the balance on her, and just cope with blowing the highlights. I could go back and take a picture at a similar time of the window and Photoshop it in, but it wouldn't be the same time, it wouldn't be the same light. It's got to be just this picture. Probably the dynamic range of the camera would probably have coped, but it was one of those scenes that unfolded that I just had to capture at the time, and I couldn't spend too long faffing around. So I cope with the blown highlights, I don't care, and it's one competition that people don't seem to care about. So it's one of those times where you can actually ignore the rules. So we had puppies. My dog Meg has had a couple of litters, and this was one of hers, and this ended up in the Times newspaper. It's always worth, if you have a bit of an unusual photograph, it's certainly worth sending them into press agencies. There are some reputable ones. I use cover images, and if I get anything a bit unusual like this, or one of my daughters in a bunch of daffodils at lambing time, they love them to fill the pages of newspapers just to take away from the dross of the news, and they do pay, and it's fine. And so this one went in the Financial Times and the Times, and it rumbled around the broadsheets for a few weeks actually. But she'd actually had 10 pups, and I used to feed them, and every time I went in, they'd jump up there like this. And so I thought, oh, there must be a picture here. So I went in, I set my camera up on a low tripod, but I didn't feed them, and I went out again. I left them to settle and mooch around the back of the stable again. And then when I came in this time, I had the shutter release in my hand. And so I went, dinner, and then I squatted down next to the camera, and they were like, oh, where's she gone? Where's she gone? And so that's how I managed to take that photograph. Lots of people ask me, so I thought I'd tell you. Okay, so there are lots of processes that happen on the farm. We've talked about lambing time, the silage time, which is here. It's really unusual. We've never silaged at night before, but the weather has changed in the last few years. We don't get the consistency of nice weeks of sunshine or weeks of dry weather or dry spells. And so there's a lot of snatching and grabbing. Now, whether this is a long-term phase that we're in, I just don't know. But the last few years, it certainly has been snatch and grab with regards to getting the silage in. So we get silage in two forms. We make bales, which gets wrapped in black plastic, and that's great for carting out into the fields that feed the animals that are outside during the winter. And then we also chop it, which is what's happening here, and it gets blown into the grass cart, one that's on the left, and that goes into a big silage pit in one of our sheds, gets squashed down and flattened, and then the cows chomp away at it throughout the winter. So it's a massive, big mat of grass. And so this is what we're capturing here. And somebody said, oh, shame about the pylon. I was like, well, it's in the middle of our farm, I don't mind. It almost breaks up the light a little bit in the background, and it's organic, and it would have been painstaking to remove it. I couldn't be bothered, but I quite like it, and it doesn't bother me. Lets me know which field I'm in more than anything. Now, here's another picture, another one of my favourite hidden corners. This is another one of my daughters. This is Rosie, my youngest, and this was this year. This is at lockdown. Sorry if you've heard the story of this before, but we got locked down, and we actually had coronavirus about the first week. We're all very poorly, but we're all fine. And then we went straight into lambing about a week after we recovered, and the children were at home, so we had lots of help, which is kind of good, but they weren't quite old enough to be that helpful, so it was kind of bad, but we got through it. We're still alive, they're still alive, and that's the important thing. But Rosie had this little lamb, and we went into the byre. Now I'm going to play another video clip.
Okay, so here we have the byre, and this is where I've taken that picture of Rosie's lamb. So during lockdown, children didn't have any school friends popping round, and they helped with lambing a lot. And so Rosie got very attached to a lamb, and this is the byre that I chose to photograph Rosie in with the lamb. Now, ordinarily, this is exactly how it looks, but it's very, very, very dark. I'm using a Rotolight Neo just to light it at the moment, so you can see, and a swallow joins us. But if I turn the Rotolight off, I've got my aperture wide open on this lens to 2.8, and we're on a shutter speed of 1 to 50 for recording, and you'll see how dark it goes. I'll just show you here. Okay, so that's how dark it goes. Now, I'm really familiar with this place. I love the back of the cow barn here. So in order to take that picture of Rosie in this very low light situation, I used a tripod. Rosie sat still rather well, but I also built it in HDR. So I took 5 photos of different exposures to catch the light coming in the window, and I used Lightroom and put those 5 different exposures, built them up together, and got the image that you can see here. Now, the other thing is about this byre is that on a sunny day, it's not sunny at the moment. I'll try and come back for this recording when it's sunny. But the light comes through that window on an early morning. So I'm really familiar with all of our barns and what time of day the light's best in them and where it falls and where the shadows are. So again, I picked my moment, there's another swallow, picked my moment to take that picture, depending on where the light was just right as it was coming straight through the window and hitting that side wall. Now, there's also a lot of foliage out there that's grown up since that picture was taken, because that was back in spring. Hello, swallow. And now we've got a lot of, they're actually blackcurrant bushes, which are delicious, just outside the window. So the light's never going to be that good in here until winter or spring again. So there we go, that's how I got that shot.
I've been really fortunate that since winning the competition, it's allowed quite a bit of commercial work coming my way, and I do quite a lot of agricultural commercial work, and this was for a welly shoot. And we all got free wellies out of it, which was quite useful. We wear a lot of wellies. Yeah, and that my life now is as a commercial agricultural photographer. So thank you ever so much for listening. I hope you got a few hints and tips, and if not, had a nice evening.
That was fantastic. Thank you. You've got some really stunning images there. I mean, there was quite a few I recognised, but obviously there's one in particular I recognised because it was in the SheClicks exhibition.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
I had a list of notes and I was meant to have that. I have forgotten to bring them next to me. Look, I can remember everything, but that was on my notes. Sorry.
No problem. So we've got a few questions if you're happy to answer them.
Yes, of course. Yeah, no problem.
Heather says, obviously you need to travel pretty light around the farm. So what camera and lens or lenses do you go around with?
Well, that's actually a really good question. My favourite one is my Sony A7R III, because it's got 42 megapixel sensor. So even if I haven't quite got the range with the lens on, I can crop in quite nicely. I just love it. Its autofocus is just unparalleled. It's just superb. It's got the animal and the human eye autofocus, and I know some of the other brands catching up with that. It's generations ahead of the others with mirrorless technology, and I think it's pretty much got it sussed. It does exactly the sort of stuff I want it to do. And normally I'll chuck on the 24 to 70 G Master f2.8 lens, which is really, really versatile. But what I've actually learned to do, and somebody recommended doing this, is picking one of my other lenses out. I've got a couple of primes and a couple of other zooms. And to really understand the depth and the capabilities of your equipment is to put it on, leave it on, and see how you get on. And so I might spend a week with my 35mm 1.8 or my 55mm on or something, and really learn and push the limits and the capabilities of that lens. And that's really helped me learn my equipment well. So forcing myself almost to step outside my comfort zone, put something on that I wouldn't be used to using, or maybe not think to that situation. If I want to go light, if I was going away for a weekend, or photography wasn't maybe the main reason I was out and about, I would put my 55mm on, 1.8. It's a beautiful lens, the Sony 55mm. It's just so sharp. I absolutely adore that lens. It's got gorgeous bokeh when you've got it wide open. It's very light with the mirrorless body, and it'll just slip in my handbag really neat. I don't really have a handbag, it's more like a satchel, but yeah.
Great. And I think it's very easy to underestimate the impact that IAF has, or has had, on the industry, actually, because it's something that's been around for a while, but then when it started to work with continuous autofocus, it actually became really, really useful. And it is just amazing. You know, the ability to ensure that you've got sharp eyes.
Yeah, well, I came from Nikon. I was shooting Nikon originally. I won the cameras. I won my Sony camera with the British Light Photography Awards, and the guys from Sony were very, very persuasive. And so I decided to give it a go. And honestly, the first time I tried the Eye Autofocus, and I realised with my photography, particularly animals and children, which I do a lot of, it's staggering, absolutely staggering. It's so fast, it's so reliable. Yeah, and I don't need to go anywhere else.
Okay. Laura has asked what ISO you used for your amazing, your winning photo. I think she's talking about the one with the lamb, where you're feeding the lamb and all the little other lambs are around you. I think that's
I should have written down the details. I haven't. This is a different computer. I haven't got the image on here. I have a feeling I maxed it out to 1,000. Oh well, I say maxed it out. It wasn't maxed out, but I think I'll have pushed it right up to 1,000, because of course, whenever you're photographing animals, it's really important to raise the shutter speed. If you're just using the stand lens, not like a big telephoto, for handheld, okay, you want to 60 is okay, and then with animals and children, you want to push up to about 125 shutter speed. But I tend to go that little bit faster because you just don't want blur. Animals do move quite quickly. So I did know when I was feeding the lambs that I needed to capture them when they were just still, and I needed a fast enough shutter speed. So I did push the ISO. But I did have a Nikon D750, which equally had a Sony sensor. And it's a fabulous dynamic range throughout with the sensor on that. And I think that helped capture that image. I wouldn't have got the image to the same quality if I'd have used a lesser camera, to be sure.
Okay. The internet had a bit of a blip when you said what you thought the ISO was. So would you mind just saying it again, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes. It was about, I think I'll have pushed it up to 1,000 on that.
Right.
I will have reduced some of the grain with Lightroom. Lightroom's very capable at reducing a lot of grain and noise, but there isn't too much noise on the D750, even at 1,000. No. I don't worry too much about noise. It's all part of taking a picture.
Okay, thank you for that. Laura's got a follow-up question, which is about the print that you said that you were printing at 4 meters wide. Is that from the Sony A7 Mark III or the Sony A7R Mark III?
That was the R Mark III. Obviously, that's got the 42 megapixel as opposed to the 7 III, which is the 24. But to be honest, even with 24 megapixels, I did manage to get it a really sharp shot. So that will blow up huge anyway. I've had a couple of pictures before blow up to 4 meters for various advertising purposes. And if anything, it's the standard printing that lets it down. It's actually pixelation on the print rather than what you actually see on the image. And you can blow it up massively. You can get some, I can't remember what the software was, where you can blow it up to work out what it would be at that size, and you can actually have a look. And the pixels are just about going just slightly at 4 meters. But you'd still be able to go and look right up and still see one of the Herdies' faces.
Great, thank you. And Jay has asked, do you always work in manual exposure mode?
Yes, I went to evening classes and knew nothing about digital photography. I had it on auto, and my tutor at the time, rightly or wrongly, said, if you're going to learn how to use a digital camera, put it on manual. If you want to do it easier, learn aperture priority or shutter priority and go through there. And I just thought, right, I'm going to make it really hard and stuff. And I went manual. And even now, there are loads of situations I know fine well that shutter priority would be more appropriate or aperture priority. But I've got so used and so familiar with my camera whizzing around, and I've got all my dials and my buttons customized that I just stay in manual and just fire away.
Do you tend to adjust the sensitivity, the ISO, manually as well, or do you put that in auto?
Yeah, I've got a button on the back that I customise for that, and I can whiz the dial. Sony's got a dial at the back, so actually very quickly I can just do that whilst looking through there. Right. Quite often you'll assess the picture anyway before you go to take it. So I do property photography as well, and those I'll just set the ISO before I start shooting. And I know if I'm shooting inside with the animals, I'll just boost the ISO and then whiz around with the aperture and the shutter speed. But I do have the ISO on the little round dial on the back as well.
Okay, that's a useful tip. And final question isn't actually photographic in nature. It's what is the name of the farmer who breeds the non-antibiotic chickens, please?
Yeah, they're Renaissance. They're at Canaher Farm, which is CANNERHAUTH, Canaher, and they're just outside Penrith. And actually, they just had a whole load of chickens done, and we've got ours in. We've just had them for dinner, and they were amazing. I'm really quite glad I put the chicken in because it was fabulous chicken. It tastes like chicken you used to when you were a child. And that's what we're trying to do here on our farm. We produce our lamb and our beef. We're not organic, but we don't intensively farm. They're not in sheds being fastened on processed foods. We, our fell-bred lamb, it tastes so much better. It is absolutely delicious. So we get spoilt with with our lamb and our beef. And so with chicken, I can't eat supermarket chicken. Oh, and if you have one of their chickens, you wouldn't eat supermarket chicken again either. So I just they're called Renaissance, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for that. So thank you. There's lots of people on Facebook and in the chat saying thank you very much. They really enjoyed your pictures and they've really enjoyed the presentation and hearing your tips and advice. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thanks ever so much. Yeah, I've had a lovely evening. Thank you very much. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.